The world had changed for Marcus Bennett since the accident. Once a prominent corporate lawyer, he now navigated life in darkness, relying on his wife Sarah to be his eyes. The first few months after losing his sight, Sarah had been everything he needed: patient, attentive, his anchor in a world of shadows. But lately, something had shifted. Sarah's once steady presence became erratic. Her gentle voice grew distant, often hushed in secretive phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room. He told himself it was the strain of caring for a blind husband, the weight of becoming both partner and caretaker. Yet a nagging doubt persisted, whispering that there was more to her changing behavior than simple fatigue. The morning everything changed started like any other, until it didn't. Marcus blinked awake to his usual darkness, but something was different. Faint shapes emerged from the blackness, vague outlines of the bedroom furniture he'd memorized by touch. His heart pounding, he almost called out to Sarah, eager to share this miraculous development. Then he heard her voice floating up from downstairs, speaking in urgent whispers. "We need to move faster. I can't keep this up much longer." The words froze him in place. As his vision slowly returned over the following days, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. He would keep his recovery a secret. Better to be blind to Sarah's eyes while he pieced together what was happening in his own home. The irony wasn't lost on him. After months of darkness, he was choosing to stay in it. New details emerged daily. Designer clothes appeared in their closet. Jewelry he'd never bought her gleamed on their dresser. Sarah's book club meetings stretched later into the night, and her perfume changed to something expensive and unfamiliar. Their house, once a sanctuary, felt like a stage where he played the role of a blind man while trying to spot the truth. One evening, as he pretended to struggle with organizing his desk, a task he could now see perfectly well to do, Sarah watched him from the doorway. "You're doing better lately," she said, her tone carrying an edge he couldn't quite read. "Much better." His hands fumbled with the papers, heart racing as he wondered, did she know? Was this whole performance as transparent as the returning light in his eyes? The next week brought more mysterious phone calls, each one setting his nerves on edge. "Everything's in place," he overheard her say one afternoon. "Just waiting for the right moment." That night, Sarah kissed his forehead with unusual tenderness. "You know I love you, right?" she asked. And for the first time in their marriage, Marcus wasn't sure how to answer. His improving vision revealed a woman he barely recognized, someone who moved through their house like a stranger, checking her phone constantly, jumping at unexpected sounds. The safe in his office, which he'd never told her about, showed signs of tampering. Their joint account statements, which she now read to him, didn't match the numbers he could see on their online banking portal. Marcus realized he was seeing more clearly than ever, but the truth remained frustratingly out of focus. One thing was certain: the darkness he'd feared for so long had become his greatest ally in uncovering whatever secret Sarah was keeping. Now he just had to decide what to do with the knowledge that his wife thought he was still living in a world of shadows, and why that deception seemed to matter so much to her. Marcus tried to rationalize Sarah's behavior. She'd been his rock through the darkest period of his life: the accident, the endless doctor's appointments, the frustrating months of learning to navigate without sight. Perhaps she just needed breathing room. But then came the receipt. He found it while sorting laundry, a task Sarah usually guarded zealously, tucked into her coat pocket. The paper was from Delmonico's, their old anniversary spot, dated on a night she'd claimed to be working late. When he casually mentioned it over breakfast, her laugh seemed forced. "Oh, that? Just grabbed dinner with Lisa from accounting." The explanation was plausible, yet something in her voice rang hollow. The discoveries kept coming. A crystal perfume bottle appeared on her vanity, Chanel if his returning vision served him right. She'd always been practical about cosmetics before, favoring drugstore brands. The expensive bottle felt like an intruder among her simple toiletries, much like the growing tension that had invaded their once peaceful home. He caught himself analyzing every sound, every shift in her voice. "You're being paranoid," he whispered to himself during sleepless nights. But was he? The subtle changes in Sarah's behavior seemed more pronounced with each passing day. Her phone buzzed constantly now, and she'd step onto the porch to take calls, her voice a mere murmur through the walls. The rain was drumming against the windows one Tuesday afternoon when Sarah burst through the front door, water dripping from her coat. Marcus pretended to be absorbed in his audiobook, but couldn't miss the male voice emanating from her phone. "Everything's set for tomorrow." Her hushed reply, "Perfect, see you then," sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the weather. Later that week, he overheard her in the kitchen, her words sharp with frustration. "This is taking too long, we need to move faster." The conversation ended abruptly when he entered the room, and Sarah's smile seemed plastered on, her eyes not quite meeting his supposedly sightless ones. Each new clue felt like another piece to a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to complete. Was he manufacturing suspicion from innocent coincidences? His mind kept circling back to their history together, 15 years of trust and partnership. Yet something had shifted, like furniture rearranged in a blind man's house. Everything familiar, but somehow wrong. The Mont Blanc pen was the final piece. He found it in her desk drawer while searching for stamps, an exquisite piece of craftsmanship he could now secretly appreciate with his returning sight. When he asked about it, Sarah's face drained of color. "Just a thank you gift from a client," she stammered, snatching it away. But Marcus knew better. Sarah worked in hospital administration, where the most extravagant gifts were usually fruit baskets or chocolate boxes, not $1,000 pens. Something was definitely wrong. The question was, did he really want to know what it was? Everything changed on a Wednesday afternoon. Sarah emerged from their bedroom in an outfit that seemed designed for someone else's eyes. A black dress that whispered expense, heels that clicked with purpose, and makeup that transformed her usual understated beauty into something more dramatic. "Running some errands," she said breezily, dropping a quick kiss on his cheek. "Won't be long." Marcus waited 3 minutes after the door closed, counting each second in his head. Then he grabbed his coat and followed. His returning sight made him feel like a spy in his own life as he watched Sarah slide into a sleek Audi that had pulled up to their curb. The driver was a man he'd never seen before, mid-40s, silver threading his temples, wearing what looked like a tailored suit. Marcus's stomach churned as he watched them drive away, Sarah laughing at something the stranger had said. He flagged down a taxi, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Follow that Audi, please." The words felt ridiculous, like something from a cheap thriller, but the pain in his chest was real enough. The cab driver, mercifully, asked no questions. They ended up at Café Laurent, an intimate French bistro where Marcus and Sarah had celebrated their 10th anniversary just last year. From behind a newspaper at a corner table, he watched them settle into a cozy spot on the terrace. The man leaned in close, too close, as Sarah spread papers across the table between them. She touched his arm while making a point, her wedding ring catching the afternoon light. Marcus ordered a coffee he couldn't drink, his eyes fixed on the scene before him. Sarah was animated, gesturing with her hands the way she did when excited about something. The man nodded, scribbling notes on a leather-bound pad. It looked like a business meeting, except for the way Sarah kept glancing over her shoulder as if expecting to be seen. That evening, Sarah breezed through their front door humming to herself. She kissed his forehead and launched into a detailed story about running into an old college friend at the grocery store. Every word felt like acid in Marcus's ears. He'd never known her to be such a skilled liar. Over the next week, he tracked 3 more meetings, each one in a different location, each one with the same man. A quiet corner of the park where they huddled over more paperwork. A hotel restaurant where they shared what looked like an intense conversation. A downtown office building where they disappeared inside for 2 hours. Each time, Sarah returned home with a different story, each lie more elaborate than the last. "You seem busy lately," Marcus ventured one evening as they sat in their usual spots on the couch, the television providing background noise neither of them was listening to. Sarah's fingers paused over her phone screen. "Oh? Just the usual. Work's been hectic." "Anything interesting happening there?" He kept his voice casual, almost disinterested. "Not really." She shifted slightly, her tone too light. "Same old hospital drama. Budget meetings, staff reviews, nothing exciting. Marcus nodded slowly, pretending to focus on the television show he couldn't have named if his life depended on it. The weight of her lies settled between them like an unwelcome guest. He needed more than suspicions now. He needed to know exactly what was happening before he confronted her. But as he sat there listening to Sarah tap away at her phone, one thought kept circling through his mind. Had she started seeing this man before the accident, or had his blindness simply provided the perfect opportunity? The shower's steady rhythm provided cover as Marcus quickly unlocked Sarah's phone. He'd memorized her password weeks ago, watching her fingers dance across the screen when she thought he couldn't see. A string of messages from an unknown number filled the screen, each one encrypted. His fingers hovered over the screen, tempted to dig deeper, but the sudden silence of the shower stopping sent him scrambling to replace the phone exactly as he'd found it. The real breakthrough came 3 nights later. Sarah had taken a sleeping pill, something she'd started doing recently, perhaps to quiet a guilty conscience. Marcus waited until her breathing settled into a steady rhythm before slipping into her home office. The room still smelled of her perfume, expensive and unfamiliar, like everything else about her lately. His hands moved methodically through her desk drawers, years of legal training helping him catalog everything he found. Credit card statements, bank records. Then, in the bottom drawer, behind a false panel he never would have found if he were truly blind, a sleek metal lockbox. The lock yielded easily to the small set of picks he'd ordered online. Inside, indexed with surgical precision, lay the anatomy of his own destruction. Power of attorney documents, transfer of asset forms, trust modifications, all of it bearing his forged signature. Signatures she'd helped him practice making after the accident, claiming it would help him maintain independence. Page after page revealed the scope of her betrayal. She'd been systematically transferring everything into her name, their properties, his investment accounts, even his majority stake in the law firm. The man he'd seen her meeting, he recognized the name now on the legal letterhead, was one of the city's top estate attorneys. They weren't planning an affair. They were planning a takeover. Marcus photographed everything with trembling hands before returning it exactly as he'd found it. Back in bed, he lay awake listening to Sarah's steady breathing, marveling at how peaceful she looked, like she wasn't orchestrating his financial execution. For the next week, he played his part perfectly. The devoted blind husband, grateful for his wife's support, oblivious to her machinations. He made his own preparations in secret, meeting with his own lawyers, gathering evidence, building his case. On a sunny Tuesday morning, Sarah descended the stairs to find the kitchen table set for their usual breakfast. Coffee cups, fresh croissants, and a thick manila envelope she definitely hadn't left there. Her steps faltered as she approached. "Coffee's hot," Marcus said softly from his seat at the counter. "You might want to pour yourself a cup before you open that." Sarah's hands shook as she lifted the envelope. The sound of paper sliding against paper filled the quiet kitchen. Her sharp intake of breath told him the moment she recognized the legal documents for what they were. "Marcus?" Her voice cracked on his name. "What is this?" He took a deliberate sip of coffee before answering. "Divorce papers, along with evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The DA's office is particularly interested in the forged signatures." "But how?" The papers rustled as her hands began to tremble. "You couldn't have known?" Marcus stood slowly, deliberately. He walked toward her without hesitation, his steps sure and steady. "That's the thing about being blind, Sarah. People tend to show you exactly who they are when they think you can't see them." Her face had drained of color as the implications hit her. "How long?" she whispered. "Long enough to watch you meet with James Davidson 6 times. Long enough to document every transfer, every forged document, every betrayal." He gestured to the papers in her hands. "You have a choice. Sign those and walk away with what you came into this marriage with, or don't. And explain to a jury why you thought your blind husband wouldn't notice you stealing his life out from under him." Sarah sank into a chair, the papers slipping from her fingers to scatter across the table. It wasn't. I never meant to get caught, Marcus finished for her. I know. But here's what you never understood, Sarah. I didn't need my sight to see who you really were. I just needed to open my eyes. Let me guess. Marcus's voice was steady, measured. You thought I was sleeping with someone. That would have been simpler, wouldn't it? Just a cheap affair to justify what you were planning. Sarah's mascara ran in dark rivulets down her cheeks. Marcus, please. He's from Carlton and Associates, isn't he? Their senior partner in estate law. Marcus moved closer, each step deliberate. Quite a resume. Specializes in asset transfers, trust modifications. Perfect choice for what you had in mind. The color drained from Sarah's face as understanding dawned. She gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, her knuckles white. How long? She whispered. How long have you been able to see? A bitter smile played at the corners of his mouth. Long enough to watch you meet him at Café Laurent. Long enough to see you wear that black dress you bought just for him, the one you thought I'd never know about. Long enough to see every document you forged, every account you tried to drain. Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank into a kitchen chair. I never meant to get caught, Marcus finished. Or to hurt me? Because from where I'm standing, and yes, Sarah, I can actually stand here and look you in the eye now, you meant to do both. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You don't understand. After the accident, seeing you so helpless, you thought I was broken. Marcus cut in, his voice sharp. That I'd never recover, never be whole again. So you decided to take everything while I was down. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. Did you ever love me at all, or was I just a convenient mark? Sarah's sob caught in her throat. Of course I loved you. I still don't. The word fell like a gavel. Don't say you love me while there's a contract in your desk drawer with my forged signature, transferring everything I own into your name. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 2 decades of shared memories now tainted by betrayal. Outside, a car horn honked, a reminder that the world was still turning while theirs crumbled. The divorce papers are fair, Marcus continued, his voice softer now, tinged with something like pity. More than fair considering what you tried to do. Sign them, and we'll call it even. Fight me on this, and the next papers you see will be from the district attorney's office. Sarah's shoulders slumped in defeat. I never thought you'd find out, she whispered. That was your mistake. Marcus straightened up, adjusting his tie, a habit from his courtroom days. You were so focused on what I couldn't see that you forgot who I was. He turned toward the door, then paused. You know what the real irony is? If you'd just asked for a divorce when I was blind, I probably would have given you everything anyway. I loved you that much. The door closed behind him with a quiet click, leaving Sarah alone in the kitchen. She stared at the divorce papers through tear-blurred eyes, seeing not the legal terminology, but the ruins of a life she'd destroyed with her own hands. Outside, the morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, tiny things she'd never noticed before, now painfully visible in the harsh light of day. Like Marcus's sight, the truth had returned slowly, then all at once. And now, sitting in the wreckage of her carefully laid plans, Sarah realized that she had been the blind one all along.